Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Tari Ryan. I'm the head of Children's Library Services for St. Clair County. I want to welcome you all. I know that some of you are on the waiting list, and I'm so happy that you were able to attend. I know it's been a popular event, and I appreciate that everyone's patience and kindness and the whole process of putting this program together. I think when I was asked to consider who should come as part of our 100th anniversary celebration this year, I really had to pause a moment and think who would be most impactful for our community. And when I thought about it, the name Temple Grandin came to my mind, but I wasn't sure that I would be able to have the opportunity to have her come. Well, serendipity and some luck and her schedule all collided, and she's here today. And so I know some of you had an opportunity to have a book signing with her prior. We will be signing books after the program as well.
Hi everyone, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. As Tari said, my name is Allison Arnold. I'm the director of your St. Clair County Library System, and I can't tell you how pleased I am to welcome you to our second event of the 100th Anniversary Celebration Speaker Series. We would not be able to present such a wonderful slate of speakers to you if it weren't for some great people. First would be our library board. Their ongoing support allows us to do some really wonderful things. Also, I'd like to thank our staff. Their creativity and their passion for serving the public and your information entertainment needs for the library is really a blessing. And first and foremost, or last and foremost, I suppose, I really would like to thank our sponsors this year, McLaren Port Huron, McDonald's, and North Star Bank. Without their generous support, we would not be able to present this wonderful speaker to you tonight. And again, just thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and see such a wonderful speaker. Thank you.
All right, so Dr. Grandin, would you like to come out? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to turn this computer around where I can see it. Okay, that's good. Got a lot of things to talk about tonight, and if this mic doesn't sound good, I'll get the other one. I can't tell, so if it doesn't work, then I'll get the other mic. Lots of things to talk about tonight, and one of the things I want to talk about is busting through silos. And I found this great picture online of this big hydraulic nibbler chewing away at silos. They're pretty hard to bust up. It takes a long time to chop them up. You know, we got to get the business people talking with the educators. I made it a point in doing my talks to talk to a whole lot of different kinds of people. I got to go to NASA, that was really fun. I got to do an industrial training conference. Then I do some cattle conferences. I like to read business magazines. Educators need to read business magazines so that they can find out about all the interesting, fun things there are to do in business. And we also get too much into the diagnostic silos. I'm not big on diagnostic silos. One of the problems you have with the autism diagnosis is it goes all the way from Einstein to somebody who can't trust themselves, and you got the same name. We need to get people collaborating. Well, I just want to show you sometimes how just silly medical model can sound. And we're going to apply medical model to a Delta Airlines jet that had a problem at the Atlanta airport. It had a microbleed in the anterior proximal rotary appendage. That's some good gobbledygook. In fact, if you look up on some of the gobbledygook in Latin, it means silly things, like the membrane that covers the brain is the tough mother, the dura mater, the tough mother. You know, then we've got olives and almonds and seahorses in our brain. Not very scientific, they just called it what it looked like. Now, the thing I want to ask you is, what would happen to some of the great innovators today? This is something that really, really worries me. And a lot of these people had a really unconventional educational path. Did you know that Jane Goodall had a 2-year secretarial degree when she did her famous study? That was an associate's degree. She was in the UK, so they probably call it something different. But that's basically what she had. And she got her PhD without a bachelor's. Grew up in a home full of books. I can't emphasize the importance of books. Books were a very, very big, important part of my life. Mother would read to us. She'd even take Oliver Twist and read it from the original Dickens. And she'd pick out the interesting parts and she'd skip the boring parts. Thomas Edison was a hyperactive high school dropout. They labeled him addled. I don't know, that was a long time ago way of describing some of these things. He probably had autism. I read a biography about Edison. I also read a biography about the Wright brothers, that famous book that's been out. Ooh, sounds kind of OCD and autistic-like. Yeah, and I've made a point of going out to Silicon Valley. Been there. Oh, have fun spotting the Asperger. Have fun spotting the AST. See, the thing that really bothers me, especially on the fully verbal end of the spectrum, is I'm seeing kids, when they age out at 22, 25 years old, going into two groups. The ones where they were pushed to get jobs, I'm going to be talking more about that, doing great, and the ones that become recluses in their room. Yeah, we got to not let that happen. You know, Steven Spielberg was rejected from a top film school, bullied in school. I was bullied a whole lot in school. High school was horrible. I was called Workhorse. I was called Bones because I was skinny. The only places I was not bullied was shared interests: horses, model rockets, and electronics. Get kids involved in shared interests because that's where they can have friends. It could be Boy Scouts, karate, robotics, art, band, theater, all kinds of different things. Now, this is an interesting book. Anyone interested in different kinds of minds needs to read Elon Musk's book. He was also bullied in school. You know, you can make your own opinion about him after you read the book, but what would happen to him in today's system? Very interesting book. Recommend it. And there's his Dragon capsule docking with the space station. You know, its real name is Puff the Magic Dragon. That doesn't sound very scientific or professional, so they just changed it to Dragon. And there I am in the NASA control room. That was super interesting. All kinds of people probably on the spectrum there. I have talked to I'm serious. And the grandkids are coming up with autism. I also found out the secret of the control room. I walked in there and you see there's nobody in there. Because as the space station goes around, it goes into zones where the communication blanks out. Just like you know exactly which piece of highway your cell phone's not going to work. Mass potty break. They got 6 minutes to run out and use the facilities. And there's the space station simulator, really super cool. And one of the things we're going to have to be looking at a lot more in the future as far as jobs go is what jobs are artificial intelligence going to take over? Watch out, highfalutin doctor. They're going to get your job. Well, I have friends that are having their problems with the bank right now, and their bank accounts getting all messed up because they're trying to do it with AI. I'll tell you what the space station has done. They like old reliable. You know what runs a space station? It's not HAL. It's 3 IBM ThinkPads. Big, thick, black clunkers with a little red thing in the middle. I think I'd rather trust those. My life depended on it. Now, what are some of the common denominators of the unique minds? They grew up with books and learning. You know, and this is where libraries are just so important. We've got to make sure we keep funding for libraries. Early exposures to career interests. I get asked all the time, how did I get interested in the cattle industry? I was exposed to it when I was a teenager. Also, learning how to work. This is one of the biggest problems I'm seeing. Well, let's just start out with things that was done with me. When I was 8, my mother had a party. I had to be party hostess, learn how to shake hands. Kids are 11, they can become church ushers. They can walk dogs for the neighbors, help in the farmer's market, help at the nursing home, entertaining the clients. We got to figure out things for them to do. Also, some of these innovators were not over-specialized. Also, they had mentors. I had good mentors. My mother, when I was young, great teachers, and my science teacher, and internships. My mother and the school were setting up internships before internships were the thing. Now, in our animal science department, we have maybe 50 different internships so students can try careers on. Now, I thought this was an interesting study. Nobel Prize winners in science were 50% more likely to have an arts and craft hobby compared to scientists in the Science Association. Things like being a painter, a musician, an actor, a dancer, a photographer, or they built things. These are all the things that are taken out of the schools today. The other thing that's bad about taking out things like theater and welding and auto mechanics, those are careers that are still going to be here when AI takes over a whole lot of other stuff. You all heard about Watson? You know, the IBM computer? Maybe that's the son of the IBM ThinkPad. Okay, get some water here. Okay, schools need to be keeping these classes. Sewing, cooking, playing musical instruments, woodworking, welding. There's tons of jobs right now in auto shop. Tons and tons and tons of jobs. Plumbers, electricians. AI is not going to take over these jobs. It's not going to take over a nurse or a pediatrician, somebody like that. Well, Stevie Jobs here, he was bullied in school. And he learned calligraphy. Somebody might think that's a useful class, a useless class. Well, that's why computers have pretty fonts. Einstein had no speech until age 3, and he played the violin. Maybe that helped him with a theory of relativity. Too many kids are getting labeled. Because to get any kind of special ed service, you got to get a label. But I'm worried that they're getting shunted out. I worked 20, 25 years in the construction industry. I'd sell that job, design it, supervise its construction, and then I'd start it up. And I worked with a lot of quirky, skilled tradespeople. They were on the spectrum. They were straight out of the trailer park. They took welding in school. They got a job on a line at the Tyson plant or some other plant, and then they gravitate over to the maintenance shop. And they're having good careers. Then I see a 13-year-old, fully verbal, smart kid who's so overprotected, he has never gone in a store and bought something. Yeah, don't let the label define you. Don't let that happen. Dyslexia. JetBlue founder had ADHD. The head of IKEA had both ADHD and dyslexia. You might want to look up some of Betsy Morris's stuff. It's available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Now, the thing about a lot of these creative people, they did not complete a conventional educational path. So what do? If you can't graduate from high school? You can sell your work portfolio. Graphic design, computer programming, and there's all kinds of classes online for learning these things, like Khan Academy, all kinds of free programming classes. There's all this free stuff. You can put your portfolio up on LinkedIn. So what you do is you sell your work rather than yourself. You know how I dealt with interviews? I just laid the drawings out. I'll be showing you later the things that I use to sell myself, because when you're weird, you gotta show your work off. That's what you gotta do. You gotta just show the work off. That's what you gotta do. You sell the work. And the door to really good stuff is right there in that computer. You got Google now. Back when I was working in construction, we only had the horn. And when we didn't have parts, we called until we got the parts. Construction's an attitude. You have to finish a job. And when I talk to parents about getting their 16 or 17-year-old kid a job, it's right before the summer now, they'll go, we're thinking about it. I don't want to think about it. We got to do it. And let's find those back doors. Get somebody at a store just to try them out. Now, what we got to do with these kids is you got to stretch them. Don't chuck them in the deep end of the pool. You got to stretch just outside the comfort zone. No surprises. And I'll tell you what you don't do. You don't take an 18-year-old and for their first job, shove them in a store during the Christmas rush. That's not the thing to do. Okay, then you've got problems with sound sensitivity. One of the ways to desensitize that, let the kid control it. I talked to a mom just the other day. Her kid was terrified of the leaf blower. So you know what she did? She said, okay, you can turn it on, you can turn it right off. He got to loving a leaf blower. But because he could control it. Now, these hand dryers in the bathroom, they're awful. Because you stick your hands in and then they don't stop. No, you've got to have control of it. Or maybe you need a headphone to block out bad sound. So you got it there if you need it, but don't wear it all the time. You wear it all the time, makes the sound sensitivity worse. And if you know somebody with sound sensitivity, You might want to look up a paper called Environmental Enrichment is an Effective Treatment for Autism. 3 keywords: autism, environmental, enrichment. Okay, this is one of the most important slides I got, the different kinds of minds. I am a photorealistic visual thinker. I think in pictures. I talk about that in my book, Thinking in Pictures. Also in another book I have, The Autistic Brain. I think in pictures. So what kind of job's good for me? Design, industrial design. There's a whole field called industrial design. But you know, it is work. My nephew has got a 4-year college degree in industrial design. And you know what his first project was? Real, this is real. Code name, dog poop computer bag. And when he got it done, it's the Modco Shake Potty. M-O-D-K-O. Look it up online. It's got pretty good reviews. Bulldogs hate it, but for other dogs, it's pretty good. You live in a high-rise apartment building. You see, it is called work. So maybe the thing you got to design is not something you really want to do. It's not the project I'd pick out to do. Did a beautiful job. It's really nice. Aluminum, looks like a computer bag, opens up like this. And it's selling well and getting pretty good reviews. Then you have the pattern thinker. They think in patterns. These are your programmers, engineers, mathematicians. So some people are a math person, other people are a visual person. Now, I was horrible at algebra. So how did I get through college without algebra? Thank goodness, in '66, finite math was a required class. I got out of it. Sometimes you got to figure out how to get out of it. So what do you do if you're in the state of California and you can't graduate without algebra and you don't have a college, a high school diploma? Well, you find a professor at a college and show them the right portfolio, doors open. It's a matter of getting the portfolio in the hands of the right people. You can put things up on LinkedIn. There's all kinds of tools now, but don't put rubbish up on LinkedIn. I kind of cringe at some of the garbage I would have put up if that had been around when I was young. Then you have the verbal facts mind. And you might say, well, is this really real, all these different kinds of minds? Well, in the Autistic Brain book, I got science that shows that there really are 2 different ways of doing visual thinking, pictures or patterns. Now, this is what Thomas Edison had to say. I think he was my kind of mind. He says, I'm not a mathematician. I can always hire some, but they can't hire me. That's a quote from Thomas Edison. Now, what would happen to little Thomas today? Naughty boy. He did chemistry experiments on the train and burned up a train's baggage car. He almost drowned in the grain elevator. He also learned how to work at a young age. Telegraph operator at age 14, selling papers at about 10. He was supposed to be selling papers on the train, not causing fires in the baggage car. Now, interesting books coming out from Thomas West on visual thinking. And there's my book, The Autistic Brain. But we need the people that think differently, because when you put them together in teams, they can do fabulous things together. Now, watch out. The person who's going to get replaced by artificial intelligence is the hyper-specialized person. I talked to a plant scientist just this summer, and he told me that he got this super smart graduate student, but he had no creativity. You see, you need to have creativity to think up ideas for experiments. Now, this is what Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, had to say about getting too specialized. He says a degree is the first step down a ruinous highway. You don't want to waste it, so you go into doctoral research, and you end up being a big ignoramus about everything in the world except for one subdivisional sliver of nothing. Yeah. Now, artificial intelligence can do the super specialized tasks, but it can't do the secretary's job. It's going to replace the internist, the dermatologist, the highly specialized knowledge specialist. Watson's going to replace you. You saw Space Odyssey, the computer HAL. Well, HAL's a takeoff on IBM because HAL is the letters right before IBM. So Watson is the offspring of HAL. Yep, you can read some interesting things online about why HAL killed all the astronauts. He thought they'd jeopardize the mission somehow. But there's some things I don't think artificial intelligence ought to be totally controlling. The self-driving car better have a good mechanical brake and a mechanical off switch. 2 things it needs to have, so you can turn it off when you need to. Well, just to show you that I'm making this stuff up. This is a cover story on Nature. It's one of the premier science journals on a phone app for diagnosing melanoma. You know how they train it? You show it, you have to train Watson to do this. You show him thousands of verified by biopsy melanomas. Then you show him thousands of other skin cancers. It's bottom-up thinking. And when I read about this, I go, that's the way I think. I think just like an AI program. This is why it's so important to get kids out learning things. You get them out learning things, you got to fill up the database. Then you get better and better at thinking. So if you want to teach a concept like up, you better give them 5 or 6 different examples. You go up the stairs. I jumped up. I walked up the mountain. Give them different examples. But this is something that's coming. And so let's go into the kind of jobs that are not going to get replaced. Skilled trades, boy, they'll be around. They're not going to replace the guy who's going to fix a bunch of busted stuff that's full of water. No robot's going to do that. Now, visual thinkers, AI, and people with autism are all bottom-up thinkers. Now, you see, regular word thinkers are too abstract. I don't care if you're trying to solve animal behavior problems, problems with equipment, or problems with a kid. People will say to me, what do I do about autistic behavior in the classroom? Well, I don't know. What did the kid do? I was at a veterinary student conference just the other day, and I had a girl ask me, what do I do about cat behavior issues? I don't know. What did the cat do? You see, that is overgeneralizing. You see, and the same thing happens with diagnosis. When you think in words, you tend to overgeneralize. I want to get you away from that. I want you to break a problem down. How old is the kid? Can he talk? What is the problem in the classroom? Is it bullying? Is he having problems with noise? Is he having trouble with reading? And I'll give you a few other little hints. The little ones, you got to teach turn taking. Got to teach it. You've also got to give the kid time to respond. They're like a phone on one bar. It takes time for that web page to load and time for them to respond. And slow down when you talk to them and don't talk for the kid. Always give him a chance to use his words. And being a visual thinker, I noticed detail. And this helped me with animal behavior because it seemed obvious to me to look at what animals were looking at. In fact, I got a lovely little new book out that's not on the book table because it just came out. It's called Temple Grandin's Guide to Farm Animals. And Story Publishing did a beautiful job with it. Tons of colored pictures. We got all these colored pictures of ears on animals going in different directions. I want students looking at what is your animal actually attending to. I want them to see that. It's attention to visual detail. And when I first did this back in the 70s, I didn't know that other people did not think in pictures. I thought in pictures, I thought everybody thought in pictures. And then gradually I learned how my thinking was different. It's specific to general, bottom up. Yeah, the AI system is trained to diagnose skin cancer with thousands and thousands of specific examples. You can look the article up in Nature. I read it. That's exactly how they trained it. Cattle get scared of little silly things like a chain hanging down in a chute. And you know what? I still got to talk about this stuff because people are not taking them out. Okay, here's a facility here that's got a reflection on the floor. You've got some fan blades that can be moving. I got to get people to look at detail. Non-slip flooring is really important for animals. Now, I've shown this slide right here to a lot of people. Raise your hand if you notice that the animal was looking at the sunbeam. We're doing so-so here. You know who does really well on this? Elementary school kids. And then when I show it to tech people, the more mathematicians, they do terrible on this. This is why you need to have the visual thinker designing the safety systems. Like I need something to turn that car off, mechanical disconnect all electric power to the computer, shut down. That's what I need. You need visual thinkers to prevent messes like Fukushima. You know why Fukushima burned up? Because they put the emergency cooling pump in a non-waterproof basement. So what do you think happened to the electric motor when the water filled up the basement? Yeah, there's no way I would have made that mistake. I can't design a nuclear reactor. But I know that generators and electric motors do not run underwater very well. Yeah, and watertight doors would have prevented it. There's different ways to do the math. Educators get way too hung up on which method we're going to teach. We're going to teach reading with phonics or whole word. I don't care. Use both. The outcome is getting the kid to read. Different ways to teach math. Now, the thing I don't like at all in some of these new ways to teach math is they're forcing the kid to do it in the head. I learned subtraction with old-fashioned borrowing, where you mark the paper. And if I hadn't been allowed to mark the paper, I would have been in lots and lots of trouble. But what I'm seeing today is you got college kids who can do all this fancy higher math, but they can't find the area of a circle. I remember one time, it was just in last September. I was sitting in a break room with some college kids, and I was teaching them how to find the area of a circle and how to find out how many floor tiles you need to tile the room. They had no idea how to do that. No, they couldn't do this, the regular practical kind of stuff. There's some great little origami things. Now, if you want to find the cool visual math stuff, I'll tell you how to find it. Set Google for image function and type in geometry, trigonometry, perspective geometry, calculus, fractals. You will find all sorts of wonderful math things when you use the image function. Image function often will find good web pages for other stuff, too, that you won't find just using regular word Google. Now, when I think about a church steeple, I see specific ones. And I was shocked one time, this is about 20 years ago, when I asked a speech therapist about church steeple, and she saw just a pointy thing, a generalized pointy thing. Now, the thing that's interesting about artificial intelligence is they're building it exactly like our brains. So there's layers in there where you can have the abstract thing and then the primary graphic files. I go, man, this is trippy. And I just read an article in the brand new Fortune magazine that I just got, and it said they don't know how the things work. I go, whoa, man, hell. Better watch out here. Watson is the spawn of hell. Okay. All right, let's get back to work. How about having your kid, when he's 11 years old, walk the neighbor's dog, volunteer at the farmer's market, help out at the nursing home? We've got to start teaching working skills. Selling cookies and drinks. How about run a yard sale for a next-door neighbor? Volunteering at a church or community center. Animal shelter volunteering. We've got to get them learning how to work on a job outside the home. And when I was 13, Mother got me a sewing job with a seamstress. I hemmed the dresses and I took them apart. How did she get that job? It was just done in the neighborhood. There's too much a tendency to get too much medical model. Just remember how stupid anterior proximal rotary appendage sounds when you talk about a plane with that. Wonder how many people figured out what part of the plane it is. And it's a part of the plane that everybody sees and knows. It's not something, complicated engineering. Okay, at 13, I got a sewing job. At 15, I was cleaning horse stalls. I was one of these students where a regular high school didn't work. I got kicked out of 9th grade. Well, my parents had money. They sent me to a fancy boarding school, the Boarding School of Horse Barn Management. They weren't too happy that I spent 3 years riding horses and cleaning stalls and not doing very much studying. But I think Mr. Patey, the headmaster, realized I was learning how to work. So what do we do with the kid today? Well, you can finish up online, but then he needs to get a job. That's what we can do with the kid today. Sign painting. I was painting signs. I was doing carpentry work. I did an internship at a research lab when I was in college. Now, one of the things I get asked all the time, my parents had money. So let's look at where that made a difference and where maybe it did not make a difference. Now, back in the 50s, early intervention was a totally new thing. Yes, it made a difference. But now, in a lot of states, you can get decent early intervention. But the things I'm suggesting here, anybody can do. Another thing that helped me was getting on the antidepressant medication. I did that myself. I read an article in Psychology Today about antidepressants for anxiety, and I went over to the library. This is back when it was all paper. And you had to look it up in the Index Medicus, and I copied this paper on endogenous stress. Endogenous is a fancy word that means within. That's all it means. And then I figured out, and I got the GP to prescribe it. That wasn't something, I didn't need a service for that. Okay, let's say what we could do instead of the boarding school. Well, you finish up online, the state will pay for that, and you get them a job. And we've got to control the screen time. We've got to control the recluses in the room. They are having a really bad outcome. If you got one of those recluses, you wean them off really slowly, and then you replace the video games with something like auto mechanics, where there's going to be jobs. Because people are still going to have to fix that self-driving car. And I was working on my aunt's ranch. See, the thing is, every summer I was doing something different. You know, you always got to be doing different things and learning different skills. Well, I was also at the boarding school of carpentry, making the ski tow house look really nice, and I had to do it in a way that other people would like. I couldn't decorate it with flying saucers. And when I was getting my master's, I was painting signs for really, really stupid exhibits at the Arizona State Fair. And this exhibit was a Himalayan ice monster. Talk about dumb. It was a wax dummy in a freezer chest full of ice. And I'm up there on top of there painting that sign. I don't know how I got up there on that little tiny ladder. I don't even know how I did it, and I wouldn't be caught dead doing that now. But how did I get that job? I went up to an old sign painter, and I showed him my portfolio. You see, again, showing off the portfolio. That's what you got to be doing. We got to start thinking about how to get a kid into a job. Okay, now I'll tell you what was wrong with the airplane. The problem was in the up inside the plane where the nose wheel mechanism was. Anterior proximal rotary appendage. Okay, good gobbledygook there. Some of the diagnostic stuff, I think, some gobbledygook too. Okay, and there's my sign painting truck. Now, anxiety was a real big problem for me, and I kind of fought fire with fire. Now, I get all these doctors' newsletters, and I read a really cool thing in one of the newsletters on how to deal with the anxiety of trying something new. Now, taking that 18-year-old girl and putting her in that clothing store at Christmas, that was terrible. But on the other hand, you got to do little small doses, and it's like allergy shots. You don't take ragweed and just shove it in their face. Little tiny doses, and you build up the tolerance. The drug works on the bottom of the brain. Low doses, you got to use low doses of antidepressants. Doctors give out way too much drugs. And thinking in pictures, I'd explain the whole thing. And then you do low doses, and you gradually do it. That's what you got to do. My favorite class in college, one of my favorite classes was English literature. I thought I was going to hate it. You know what? I loved it because it explained the emotions. It was a great class, one of those big survey classes. Okay, my science teacher got me going, so after 3 years of horse barn management, my science teacher came on the scene to get me interested in science. So I kind of did the final year in high school in the last year. But even when I got kicked out of school in 9th grade, I was really good at reading and writing. That I already knew how to do better than some kids today do. You know how we learned that? Because I'd write up a paper in 6th grade, teacher would red mark it all up, copy edit it, and then I had to do it over again. That's how I learned how to write. For me, diagramming a sentence was useless, but just having the teacher copy edit it, that worked. Another thing that helped me is my parents spoke proper English. All right, learning to drive. Let's give you a few pointers on that. It's going to take longer. Out on my aunt's ranch, we went 3 miles up to the mailbox and 3 miles back on a dirt road. So at the end of the summer, I had 200 miles of driving. You need to burn up a tank of gas in a totally safe place before we do any traffic. Because you got to learn how to operate the car first. Then you do driver's ed. They chuck them in the deep end. I was a year before I did freeways. You just go into it more slowly. Fortunately, I took my driving test at the Fort Huachuca Army Base. There were no freeways there. Failed the first driving test, barely passed the second one. But I stayed away from those freeways for a while. So what would happen to a child like me today? No speech until age 4. Definitely symptoms of severe autism. You'll have parents that will wait 2 years to get a diagnosis. If you got a 3-year-old that's not talking, you don't wait. You start working with this kid now. Turn-taking games, teaching them words. You might want to get my Way I See It book. There's another book called Autism Breakthrough, and you get volunteers to work with this kid. And you got to control the screen time, and you start working with them right now. We're just going to diagnose them as no speech and really messed up behavior. That's what I'm going to diagnose them as. And the treatment's the same no matter what the diagnosis is. We can get too hung up on that. And then sometimes they got epilepsy and other medical problems on top of it. Okay, today I would get good early intervention, but I'd be a big prime candidate for video game addiction. I'm seeing bad things where dad is a big engineer for a major company, and he plays video games all weekend. But Junior's not learning any engineering because he's playing them just all the time. There's less opportunities for hands-on learning. People are starting to put it back. In today's paper on the plane, Microsoft's coming out with some new educational materials, and there's a neat little mechanical hand that you make out of string and soda straws. You know, we need to be doing more of those kinds of things. And teenagers have got to get work experience. And don't let the label define you. I get asked all the time if I can snap my fingers and become normal, would I want to do it? No. I like the logical way I think. I'm horrified at how illogical the world is today. Oh, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Autism is an important part of who I am, but being a college professor comes first. The things I've designed in the livestock industry come first. The label is second. People ask me, well, how did you become an autism advocate? Well, I was doing a lot of cattle stuff before I did any advocacy stuff. The cattle stuff comes first. And while coming in from the airport, I just lined up a really cool training session I'm going to be doing on animal handling and animal welfare for one of the major meat companies in June. Really looking forward to that. Just last week, they're building a big plant in Idaho. I got a chance to go up and see that. It was designed with some of my stuff. Well, I really like that kind of stuff. Now, I think it's wrong when people say you can just do everything in a book in science. This was an editorial, again, in Nature, one of the top science journals. And they said, practical experiments teach the reality of science with all its frustrations and rewards. Experiments don't always work. I was discussing with our meats department just the other day that kids today are totally removed from the world of the practical. And practical things don't always work perfectly. Practical things are not perfect. I can remember wrecking a sewing project because I cut stuff wrong and had to throw the whole sewing project out. I learned you got to be more careful. No, there's kind of a practical reality they just don't have. Now, they've done some brain scans on me, and I found out I got a big visual thinking circuit. Now, do we need to do these brain scans? No, you don't. Because, you know, my art ability showed up in third grade. So you got a third grader that's good at art, let's expand on it. I used to just do the same picture of the same horse over and over again. Expand it. Let's do a stable. Let's do a saddle. Let's do a place we can ride it. Take that thing they're fixated on and broaden it. You know, build up that ability in art. And then when you grow up, you can become an industrial designer, an artist, or drafting, all kinds of visual thinking stuff. Now, right here, let's see if the arrow will work on the, where's the arrow going? Up on the screen here. Oh, it does. Good. Okay, there's the trashed out algebra department. I basically got no working memory. But for design work, you don't need working memory. This is the reason why you burn the tank of gas up first before you do traffic, because that deals with the multitasking problem. And if they were forcing me to try to do all that math in my head, man, it's just hopeless. Do not burden these kids with long strings of verbal instruction. If there's a task that has a sequence, give them a pilot's checklist for taking apart the coffee maker. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Give them a checklist. Another little tip from the 50s is what I call teachable moments. Manners were taught in a much more structured way in the 50s. So if I stirred my mashed potatoes with my finger, mother would say, use the fork. You give the instruction rather than scream and no. Now, one of the advantages of livestock industry is it's one of these industries that has no academic barrier of entry. This is what's required academically. Read and write at the USA Today level and do the old-fashioned up through 6th grade math, the old-fashioned kind of math. In talking to our meats group just yesterday, when they have the kids in the sausage-making class, they can't find percents. Because you've got to figure out the percentage of different ingredients to put in the sausage. And I was just talking with Bob Delmore, and we were complaining about that yesterday. You know, that is old-fashioned 6th grade math. Already talked about 67, algebra wasn't required nationally. I entered college on probation. Because right next to my School of Horse Barn Management, a little college had opened up that was only 2 years old. Mother went over there, pounded open the back door, got me in there on probation. Now, once I got in there, I had to keep myself in. She couldn't do that. But at this point, I had a goal. I wanted to become a scientist. So now I had a reason to study. Educated family. Books important in my life. I can't emphasize the importance of books and reading. Art ability nurtured. And we made tons of costumes. And made costumes just out of stuff like grocery bags, tin foil, just all kinds of cardboard boxes, things like that. I would make kites and helicopters just out of little cheap materials and experiment, get them to work. And then Mother taught me to read with phonics. I was a phonics learner. Other kids are a whole word learner. My two favorite books in elementary school, a book about famous inventors. That's not the exact same book. The exact same book got, 2 moves and stuff is gone. But these are the books I found on the book website that were pretty close to what I had. A child's edition of Black Beauty and a book about inventors. And my grandfather was an MIT-trained engineer, co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes. And I used to just sit and ask him science questions. Early exposure to career interests. Kids get interested in stuff they get exposed to. This is why in the schools, let's get some other good magazines in the libraries and in the schools. How about some Business Week, real fun magazine. Some Fortune, maybe some Fast Forward, some Wired. These business magazines in there, you can read about all kinds of cool stuff. I learned carpentry. I was in an experimental psychology class. And I was a poor student except for biology and writing. Those were 2 things I was good at. Now, when I was weird, super weird. So what do you do with the interview problem? That's when I'd lay the portfolio out. And there's the drawing right there that I used to sell Cargill. I designed the front end of all the Cargill beef plants in North America. You know how I sold that job in the late 80s? I sent Bill Fielding, the head of Cargill, this drawing right here. Remember, it's pre-internet. Folds out, big paper drawing. You want something in there that's a 30-second wow. Today it will be on a phone, on a web page, but you want something 30-second wow. And make it professional. Don't put the kid's drawing on this table and then have the table showing the drawing. Crop it, please, when you put it on your phone so that when you show it, it looks professional. That matters, and it's easy to do. I've had parents say to me, my kid's really good at art. I said, have you got the stuff on the phone? You never know where you can show it and sell a job. Programming, put this much on there. Put it up online. You title it with a text title that Google can find. Someone can look at this much code and go, oh, wow, that's pretty. Okay, the hot languages in computers, and you can find them on Khan Academy and edX, EDX, Khan Academy. JavaScript, that's what makes Minecraft work. Python, Ruby, and C++, Charlie++. I can't do any of that stuff, but I did get the web pages up, and I know that they work. And then you put your stuff out there. Take the kid that likes Minecraft. Let's do Minecraft with wood blocks, where they get to do it with other kids, and you can paint the wood blocks. One kid was a big hit of the neighborhood when they had Minecraft blocks. And there's a brochure that I included in the package. Really professional. See, back in the 70s, 4-color printing cost a fortune. Total fortune. So I had to do it with black and white printing and make it look really nice. And there's the original dip vat. That was on one of my very first brochures. One of my very first projects right there, back when most things were black and white. And that's my first dip vat project there. And I'd show people my stuff, and they go, you did that? Yeah, 30-second wow. You never know. You might sit next to somebody on a bus stop. Okay, let's say a kid gets a job at a gas station at a convenience store. You see somebody that comes in with an ID card hanging around their neck, and I know they got some secret something or other here. And you whip that phone out and you show it to them, and you got a job. You never know where the person is that can open the door. They could be anywhere. There's the replica of the dip vat. The job stuff in the HBO movie's accurate. There's a scene in the movie where I went up and I got the editor's card. And that's how I started writing for the Farmer Ranchman. And how did I get the guts to do that? Because when I was 8, I had to be party hostess and go up and shake hands with my mother's guests. Or today, be a church usher and you're going to have to shake hands. You teach them how to shake hands correctly and pass out the programs. So they got the guts to walk up to the editor and get his card. And there my very first job starting. And I had some good bosses and I had some bad people. The people that did some of the bad things to me, they were the cowboy foremans. They weren't the head guys. But on that Swift project in 1974, I criticized some welding and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And Harley, the old engineer, pulled me into his little office in the boiler room. And he goes, we got to nip these little cancers before they metastasize. You're going to go up and apologize to Whitey the welder. He just calmly told me what to do. You need to find employers that will just pull them aside, don't be vague. Say, well, you got too close to a customer and you talk too loud. Watch how Susie interacts with a customer. Copy what she does. You've got to give them exact instructions on how to do retail sales. Some of these guys can be super good at retail sales. I have talked to 3 different people where teenagers that couldn't drive walked into car dealerships and started selling cars. Yeah, like 2 cars in 1 week. Because they knew all the electronics. Now, they weren't allowed to move them, but they would sit in them, demonstrate all the electronics. But they sold their cars because they really knew them. There's another one of my drawings. There's the dip vat right there. So how did I learn drafting? The first thing I had to do was learn how to read drawings. That took some time because I had to relate the line on the drawing to the actual thing. The actual drafting, I just started imitating Davy the draftsman. But in the beginning, I had to figure out how to read a drawing. There's the cattle coming up into the system that I designed. So that's one of the original pictures. There's another one of my early projects. This is the kind of stuff I put in the portfolio. Yeah, 30-second well. So we open up the big drawing. Now it would be on a phone. People will not open strange files. So sometimes it's better, don't send it to them on a flash drive. They're going to toss it in the garbage can because there's germs on flash drives. No, sometimes in the mail, it's sometimes better. And when you go in with the interview, you better make sure the iPad is charged and you don't have weird cat pictures mixed in with your portfolio. You just don't want to have that. Professional presentation does matter. I mean, of course, I was using a paper portfolio, and I made the mistake one time of letting it get raggedy. That is not good. There's another one of my designs. Now, I'm having some young people today that just look at me as autism. They don't even know I have a career. And this is one of the reasons why I'm putting all these career stuff in here. And I was talking to another guy the other day who did big, important engineering for the gas company. Big, important things that had been there for 30 years distributing gas. And yeah, he's on the autism meetings. But the people he was talking to didn't know these things he had designed. Big, complicated things. Yeah, important stuff that other people had difficulty designing. Now, when I first started out, I thought if I could just build the right equipment in the plant, that fixes everything. No, it only fixes half of it. The other half's management. So I developed a very simple objective scoring system for assessing meat plants. It's sort of like traffic rules. There's my center track restrainer system. Well, I'm not going to show any slaughter pictures tonight, but if you want to see how this works, you can look up Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin, if you want to look that up. Now, I figured out 5 things to measure. It's like traffic rules. This is what's called a critical control point approach. What are the 5 things to measure? How about education? Stay out of trouble with the law, get and keep a decent job that advances, maybe get married, have a family. Yeah, I can think of things you don't want to do. Recluse in the room, go to jail, never get a job. That's the kind of stuff you don't want to do. And again, the problem that we've got in autism is when they get older, you've got a fully verbal bunch. Then you've got some that are going to need to live in some kind of supervised living situation. And then you've got some with other medical problems and very severe stuff. And it's all got the same label. So I measure these 5 simple things. This is the critical control point approach. Okay, in 1996, when I collected baseline data for the USDA, only 30% of the plants could shoot 95% of the cattle dead with a single shot because equipment was broken. That's called management. Then when I got the power of McDonald's behind me, we made them clean it up. And one of the reasons why it worked is because using the simple scoring system, The plant knew exactly what it had to do. Now the trick is to pick out the 5 things to measure. You don't want 100 things to measure. What's the important stuff? So let's apply this model to traffic. And if I can only enforce 3 rules in traffic, I asked a lot of people this, they'll go speeding, stopping violations, but they almost always leave the big one to last, that's drunk driving. That would be number 1, then texting's gonna be right up there too. Now different kinds of minds complement each other. Let's just look about in my industry. Now you got a lot of factories around here. Laser cutting, engineering, I was looking at that stuff. The visual thinkers, my department, we lay the whole entire plant out. And then the innovative, quirky guys in the shop, they invent the new equipment. And the engineers of the more formal degrees, they're going to calculate roof trusses and boilers. Watch out, Watson might have your job. These are the things we got to look at in the future on jobs. I'm watching this AI stuff really, really closely. This is why I'm pushing things like the skilled trades. You know, it's another job, and we're in a theater. This is called the theater right here. This is a job that's not going to go away in the future. People are still going to want to watch live concerts, live theater. Those are going to be viable careers in the age of AI. Now, the people that do the back office work at the bank, I can tell you that's a big mess. Every time I turn around, I hear about another mess, bank computers. Changeover is not going to be fun. Okay, our new chemistry building is just getting finished up, and I got to tour the construction site. I got some good construction vibes there. And I met a wonderful lady, Tina, project manager for a big new fancy chemistry building. Just getting finished up. You know how she got this job? Political science major. What do you do with a political science degree? I don't know. But Tina got a job answering phones for the construction company. And then she got to learn all the vendors, the customers, because she answered all these phones. Then she started doing the accounting. She learned how to cost a job. Next thing you know, she's out in the field and she's project manager for our new chemistry building. Talk about the back door there. So let's say you got a job in a gas station and you see the ID card hanging around somebody's neck for something really cool, and you whip that phone out and you're out of that gas station. You see, you've got to start finding those doors. And that's something I figured out very early on. The movie did a great job of showing it. Okay, just a little finish up here. One big fight we have in science is observation part of science. Yes, it is. Astronomy, you're looking at things. Lots of times in science, there's accidental discoveries. Right now, there's concerns about antibiotic resistance. You know where they're finding antibiotics? Weird places out in nature. In the natural world, that's where they're finding them. Now, when the different kinds of minds get together, they can complement each other. Let's take the iPhone, for example. An artist made the interface. Steve Jobs was not a programmer. An artist. That's why the phone's easy to use. The mathematician had to make the inside of the phone work. That's the different kinds of minds working together. And I get asked all the time, well, first of all, how do you know the different kinds of minds? Well, look at what they do. But the first step is you got to realize they exist. And then you'll understand why the artists and the accountants can't stand each other. But the thing is, they both are going to need each other. And I'm getting very concerned that our educational system, and I've traveled to a lot of states, I'm not happy about what I saw in California. We're screening out too many smart students. You screen a kid out of theater or auto shop because he can't do algebra. You don't need algebra for auto shop, and you certainly don't need it for theater. But you do need the old-fashioned math. Now, if you want to be an engineer, some other chemistry, things like that, yeah, you're going to need algebra. Well, that's why I didn't major in chemistry. Well, what I want to do right now is let's just pull a few questions, get a few questions. I want to be naughty. I'm going to pick a question. I'm not supposed to do this. Okay, just tell it to me quick and I'll repeat it. How did I get interested in biology? School. And the other thing is, they need to be doing more hands-on things. When my elementary school, we had this scummy pond out behind our school. So really, and we get tadpoles and stuff and we grow them. No, but kids aren't doing stuff like getting frogs' eggs and hatching them out. And we'd go play in a scummy pool and then we skated on it. We was a real nice elementary school and they had this scummy pool. Now they would get rid of it because they're afraid we get sick dabbling around in it. But but kids aren't getting enough of those experiences of just going out and, doing stuff out in nature. Yeah, and you learn to stay out of the poison ivy. Special diets, they help some people. You see, this is one of the problems. You've got a variability of autism, like milk-free, dairy-free. They help some people. Way too many drugs are given out like candy. Way too many. Now, I take one little tiny antidepressant. It saved me. Drugs used right can be really helpful. There's interesting research now on folinic acid. It's a metabolite of vitamin B. B is in Bravo. You can look it up on Google Scholar. I hope everybody here knows how to use Google Scholar. You want to look up medical stuff? What I have found on medical stuff, most helpful things online are patient message boards and Google Scholar, which takes you into the scientific literature. Okay? You got to make it really short because I've got to tell everybody else. How are you doing in algebra? Can you do, okay, have you ever tried geometry? Some kids, I think, need to skip algebra and go to geometry. I'm finding a lot of kids that can do geometry can't do algebra. You know what you need to do? Whack out geometry and trig online. Whack it out online. Well, can you get through it? But I would go ahead and do some of the geometry. Okay, let's think about your career. Let's figure out in construction. Like Tina's got to get her building done. She also had to deal with the little squabbles too. My student walked by there and two people were putting the stone facing on the building and they got an argument, one of those big lifts. One of them wasn't doing any work. And Tina's got to deal with those little fights. Okay, what would you like to be when you get out of school? Let's figure out how to get to the goal. You'd like to be a dog groomer. Well, that is a field right now you don't need algebra for. How old are you right now? How old are you? I'm 14. Well, you're not old enough to start a business yet. Well, so why don't you just start a little cash economy grooming dogs? And then as soon as you're old enough, you start a business. And this is another thing. They're not teaching entrepreneurship. Kids aren't doing enough lemonade stands. Okay, let's say there's a bunch of people around. Okay, 14, why don't you run Mrs. Jones's yard sale? Advertise it. You learn how to run a business because dog grooming is like a self-employed business. But that's an example of something where there's no barrier of entry to be a dog groomer. We got to start looking at what you can do. I'll tell you, to run a Fortune 500 company, and I've been in a lot of boardrooms, you have to be able to read and write at the level of USA Today and do the old-fashioned up through 6th grade math. That includes percents. So you can mix sausage, too. In our department, you need that. Okay, we're going to pick somebody else. Maybe somebody right there. Well, all right, what do you want to be when you grow up? Let's figure out how to get to the goal. I found on the wall of the art building at Arizona State University, someone had scrawled, "Obstacles are those horrible things you see when you take your eyes off the goal." I Googled it. Henry Ford said that. What's your goal? Major in computer science? Why don't you start studying it online and get your portfolio together? And then there's all kinds of forums online, like hackathons, Code Academy, there's all kinds of things. Have you starting to learn any programming? Why don't you just get online and learn it? Khan Academy, edX, free classes in JavaScript. I've looked these web pages up. And then get on some message boards and LinkedIn and put your stuff out there. Here's an app I've designed, for a phone. Computer science actually is a no academic barrier of entry industry, the same as the meat industry is. As long as you can read and write and do the old-fashioned math. If your coding's good enough, they won't care about algebra. I'll tell you that right now, they won't care. Why don't you go this summer? Also, it wouldn't hurt you one bit to get a job at Walmart just to learn the discipline. The discipline. The discipline of getting the work done. My nephew went to college for 4 years, and his first project was the Modco Shake Potty. And he did a really good job on it. M-O-D-K-O, Shake Potty. Look it up online. Okay?
I'm curious as to your thoughts. They mentioned special diets. What are your thoughts on vaccination?
I won't discuss that subject. Too controversial, and it distracts from other things I'm interested in, like careers. Go to Google Scholar and get creative with the keywords. That's all I'm going to tell you. Okay. All right? Yeah, this kid reads in 8th grade. He can read? All right, what's he good at besides being lousy in algebra? All right, let's take geometry and figure out how to get out of algebra. And if you have to take geometry online, then do it. And then show it to the school. I'm seeing kids flunk algebra, take geometry and calculus, go and take college physics, and do really well without algebra. I've actually seen that happen. What does this kid want to be when he grows up? Well, creating video games, you need to just learn the programming. You can put your portfolio up on LinkedIn. There's also a website called Gama Sutra. Gama Sutra for displaying your work in making video games. The lessons are online. You go do it. Well, the other thing he needs to do is to learn how to work. Because if he works for a gaming company the other thing on the gaming stuff, everything's going gig economy. And what that means is freelance. That's exactly what I've done with the cattle stuff. My jobs are all freelance. Go in, design the job, they pay you to do it, then it's done. Yeah, and then you got no health insurance. But that is what's happening now, gig economy. He needs to just do it. And he's not going to do it if he plays them all day. How old is he? Let's get a volunteer job this summer. How about a church job? They've got to learn how to do a task outside the home on a schedule. They've got to learn that. The whole problem with not learning how to work. And what I'm seeing is this kind of bimodal distribution where when they're 23 years old, he's in college, he's working, doing just great, and the other ones, I got a 23-year-old recluse that's stuck in the room playing video games. What you got to do with those is wean them really slowly and replace it with something else like auto shop, where you're guaranteed to get a job. Okay, right there. Okay, good. This is what's called networking. This is called networking. This person might open the door for this person. That's called networking. You see, the thing is, in the HBO movie, the doors appeared all over the place. But most people don't see them. Most people don't see the doors. They're there. All right, well then let's get you and her together and take her to some dog shows. Let's just do it, okay? Wait a minute, I can't hear you.
What are your thoughts on small animal husbandry and enrichment for breeding? Because
Breeding what now?
small animals, like pet animals, you know.
Well, I don't.
People don't treat them well, and I want to improve that quality.
What kind of animal are you working with?
You know how people put them in the tubs and say you don't need anything.
Well, you said you want to become a reptile specialist? Well, you have to start doing it. I started my business one article in the Farmer Ranchman magazine at a time. Then I went up to the editor of the national magazine and I got his card. And then I started designing things, one project at a time. You start out, you don't do big grandiose top down. One little project at a time and you build it up. That's what you got to do. I can't go into an hour-long discussion now on snake husbandry right now. I just can't. I can talk to you afterwards. And I'd get a bunch of books. You need to study it. There's a journal called, there's a lot of animal behavior journals. Look it up on Google Scholar. You will find stuff on reptiles in Google Scholar that's going to be so interesting and better than what you're going to find on the regular Google. Okay, I think we're going to take maybe 2 or 3 more questions. And then I'll go on, we'll sign books. Shameless book promoter. Okay. What age of kids do you work with? Physical therapist, okay. For tactile defensive, basically deep pressure's calming. Deep pressure's calming. I had to, you know that dreadful glaucoma test where they put that lens in your eye? You know how I got to where I could tolerate that? Put an eye patch on for about 20 minutes. Just a little bit of pressure, and then they could slip that puppy right in my eye. You see, that's one of the ways you can desensitize. Deep pressure is calming and tends to desensitize. That's why the thunder shirt works on dogs. Also, yesterday on the news, they were getting volunteers in Colorado to cuddle and hold babies that had, from mothers that were addicts. You get these babies that don't want to be touched, go down to Walmart, buy one of those slings. And when he's real little, face him in. Gets a little bigger, you can face him out. And carry him around in that sling. You can buy it at Walmart, simple thing. We've got to start figuring out simple things like that. You need to wear the kid for like 4 hours a day. And that would probably help with some of the problems. Okay? My boarding school, I was living out away from my parents' house. College, I was living in a dorm. That was pretty horrible. The dorm's name was Edgewood. It was dreadful. But you kind of do it gradually. What you do is you make a gradual transition. You've got to stretch. And then you got to learn things like bank account. And I can tell you right now, some stuff going on, AI right now and banking, it's a real mess. They want to put it all online. I don't know, Hal's going to really screw it up. Okay, all right, right here. Okay, right there. All right. All right, what job have you had that you absolutely love?
I work as a title examiner, which is...
And you're doing that right now? Yes. Good. And that's something where, you had to do the old-fashioned math, you had to be able to read and write at the USA Today level. That's great. How did you get that job? I want to talk about back doors with specific examples. How did you get the job as title examiner? A job you really like?
I fell into it. My dad was a surveyor.
Okay, your dad was a surveyor, you see, and then they knew somebody. You see, that is through networking. We've got to get into more of that sort of stuff. Okay, right here.
Yeah, you talked about the importance of getting kids out working when they're young.
Yep.
And I did that when I was a kid. And it was
Okay, we're going to have to make a short question because the others can't hear you. So you're going to have to make a short question because the other people can't hear you.
Because of liability laws now, a lot of business owners won't hire kids until they're 16 or 18.
Well, that's the reason why I'm recommending church jobs, dog walking, farmer's market, things you can do in the informal economy. In the immigrant economy, I'm going to just stick them in the bodega. We'll just do we can get away with it there. You got to remember, I come out of construction, and it's all about getting it done. And there's some things I don't want. End up in jail, not able to support themselves, or in something they just hate doing. I want them to get out there and have a good life. But there's plenty of things they can do for work. If you belong to church, man, get into the church jobs. The little ones can be ushers. The older ones can set up chairs, help with the food, entertain people at the nursing home. But it needs to be something on a schedule. Walking dogs. If you live in town, walk dogs. And I had one mom say to me, we don't have a program for that. I said, I'm talking about going over to Mrs. Jones's house and offer up your kids' services. You just set it up in the neighborhood. All right, we're going to take one more and then we're going to end it. Okay, right there. 5 years old? Is he getting a lot of one-on-one therapy with a teacher? All right, what do we do? We got a 5-year-old. You got no services. Is he talking? He's not talking with no services. We are going to have to do it in the neighborhood. Church volunteers. There's a lot of them around. retired people. There's 2 books I would get. The Way I See It, which is on the Barnes & Noble book table. There's another book called Autism Breakthrough. And the reason why I like that book is it will be easy for the grandmothers to understand. You need to get some volunteers. You need to start working with this kid now. He's got to learn turn taking. Do it with board games. Do it with, different games. He's got to learn, always give him time to talk. Speak to him slowly. Slow down when you talk to him. And you can't let him zone out on screens for 5 hours a day. You just can't. You have to work with him. And it's not rocket science. I've been to JPL. I sat in the rocket scientist seat at JPL. That's as close as I'm going to get to rocket science. If you've got 5-year-olds and 3-year-olds that are not talking, let's just say 3 years old, 5 years old, no speech, and the behavior's all messed up. That's my diagnosis. You got to start working with this kid now, because the research is very clear on this. You can't let them just zone out. But on the other hand, you got to be really careful not to drive them into sensory overload. This is the kind of kid that screams at Walmart. It's because he's sensory overloaded. You've got to get him in a quiet place, work with him quietly, but they need a lot of hours of one-on-one with an effective teacher. What's an effective teacher? Speech, eye contact, turn taking, potty, dressing, learn how to eat. He takes his clothes off all the time. That's sensory. That is sensory. That's where some things like deep pressure, get him some soft clothes. I would get this autism environmental enrichment paper. Autism environmental enrichment. What you do in that is you stimulate 2 senses at the same time, like smell and touch. And you always rotate and change the stimuli. You use regular household stuff. But you got to start working with this kid. Some people want to make you think it's rocket science. It's not, believe you me. I've been involved with things, very complicated things. All right, I think what we're going to do is we're going to end it right there, and thank you all for coming.